My granddaughters age from 22 now to 2, almost 2. So there's quite a span. They're all granddaughters. I have 5 of them. They're all beautiful. And I'm doing this for them. And hopefully, hopefully they'll know that.
Hi, I'm Benji Ross.
And I'm Anna Prepara.
And we want to welcome you to Awakening Lands,
where we aim to give land a voice and share stories of humans who are learning to live in ways that nurture and animate life.
Here, you'll find unfolding stories of regeneration that are happening all over the planet, and feel the story of humans learning to come home. We will highlight the people working to create the possibility of regenerating whole landscapes. We're calling these people landscape leaders.
The easiest way to spot them is by their devotion to their people and place. They are essential to regeneration, and we want to share their stories in order for them to see one another and for us all to see the pathways they've taken. It's in this way we'll also see entire bioregional narratives coming to life.
And we're aiming to do more than tell stories. The Earth needs her humans to come together as one, to become more than we've been. Let's co-create the spaces to do so. Let's author the stories that show us how. Are you in?
All right. Hello. We have Roberta Hill with us here today. Roberta is an all-weather outdoor enthusiast and field ecologist, an exuberant gardener, a fearless cook, and a lifelong learner, musician, and dancer. She and her husband are firmly rooted in the gardens, orchards, fields, and woodlands that grace their beloved Irish Hill in Buckfield, Maine. Roberta has been helping Mainers, that's people from Maine, and their communities protect the ecological systems they depend on for the past 3 decades. With a special passion for the lakes of her region, she has been a leader in the development of some of the state's most enduring lake education programs, has led watershed restoration and resiliency efforts, and has trained and mentored thousands of citizen scientists and stewards. She is the author of a host of print and online resources supporting citizen engagement in the protection of Maine waters, and she is keenly aware of our precious moment in history and the urgent need to restore balance to local and global ecosystems. She's thoroughly committed to the work of ensuring a better world for the future generations and grateful for having found a loving and supportive community to help her in this work at CEBE, or the local Center for an Ecology-Based Economy. Thanks for joining us, Roberta. How are you today?
I am very well. It's just delightful to be here with both of you. I'm very excited.
Great. Well, I mean, as you can tell, based on her background, you have so much amazing experience that you're bringing to talk about today, and we're both very excited. And we also have our co-host Benji here. Benji, how are you doing?
No, I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for asking. I'm just so excited for this conversation. I'm excited to get to know you better, Roberta. So we've been kicking off these conversations, trying to set a certain tone with a gratitude practice, largely inspired by Chris Casillas, who you know, another landscape leader in the design school. Sets a tone of optimism, gets us oriented towards more open and better future, the possibility of one. Plus, it just feels good. Love to hear from you. If you want, I can go to Anna first to give you a second to think about it. Are you ready to go? Something to share?
Well, I'm ready. I live in a state of gratitude, so it's never hard for me just to speak what's in my heart. I think from the bio, you could tell that I'm very grateful for to have found a partner in life to share this journey with. My husband, Scott. We live on this beautiful piece of land here in western foothills of Maine. I'm very grateful for my beautiful family. They inspire me. They drive me to be my very best self. Though they're not there driving, it's just, I love them so much and I want their future to be livable. And more than that, I want them to thrive. And I'm very grateful for this beautiful place that I live, which is unceded Wabanaki territory, otherwise known as Maine, here. And I am very grateful for the design school for introducing me to a community of like-minded people who I can learn from and share with and experiment with and have a good time with. And I'm always grateful for pretty much everything that comes my way.
Yeah, you clearly live in a state of gratitude. Anna, do you have something you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, Roberta, you're speaking to the choir here. I am so grateful for my family as well. I think that they gave me so much of my love for the place that we live in. I live on stolen Haudenosaunee land in what is colonially known as Western New York or Buffalo, New York, right on the shores of Lake Erie and Niagara River. I'm very grateful for the abundance of water that we have here and the land that has been stewarded for millennia by the Haudenosaunee and the Erie people here. So yeah, I'm very grateful as well for all those things. How about you, Benji?
Yeah, we have quite the awe-inspiring landscape today. This yurt that I'm in right now is right at the base of Lamborn Mountain in Paonia, Colorado. These are the lands of the Northern Ute that were removed from this place. I also was able to go to the Ute Museum somewhat recently, grateful to hear some of the Ute elders that are still around share some perspective of this place, which was so interesting that they still have knowledge of this place, but they're not here. But anyways, back to Mount Lamborn. It snowed last night, but it snowed on the mountain. And there is this very clear delineation between snow and where it's still fall. There's like all these rich colors, and then just a line where it goes from fall to winter. So grateful for the fact that this world gives us these moments that are deeply awe-inspiring, and they just bring so much out of us if we allow it, if we're open to it. So that was a cool moment that I wanted to share. And Anna, would you like to kick off a conversation?
Yeah, well, first of all, that was a beautiful visual. I'm picturing Mount Lamborn in my head. I was lucky enough to be able to see Mount Lamborn last month when I went to go visit. So, yeah, sounds great. And Roberta, so you shared with us that your family is your driver. They're your drivers for what you do. And your kind of origin story as a landscape leader is you're a mom, you're a grandmother, and at one point in time, you decided that you were not happy with the future that you were leaving your children, and you made a big change and you wanted to go and learn how to save the world. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that story and what your kids and your grandkids, what they think of all the work that you do.
Well, thank you for that question, because that is a story I don't get to tell very often. And so I'm looking forward to just talking to that. Back in the late 70s, I came to Maine, and how I got to Maine is a whole other story we can maybe talk about sometime. But I came to Maine, and I was recently married to my first husband, and we wanted to settle on a piece of land. And where we were living in Jackson, New Hampshire, the real estate prices were just through the roof, and you had to know somebody and those, to even get a foot in the door there. So we looked around, and we found this piece of land in the town of Brownfield, Maine, which is also in the western part of Maine, south of where I am now. And we decided to build a house or have a house built or something. And it was right during that time that we went to a talk in one of the small towns in the area and to listen to a guy. I don't know if any of the listeners remember or know of John Howe, but he actually, I found this book, and I thought I'd show this. He wrote this book, The End of Fossil Energy, and he was talking about, mostly he was talking about what happens when we hit peak oil and what's going to happen. And as you know, oil companies think that there is no peak oil and we'll just keep drilling indefinitely. So that idea went away. But the whole idea of what would it look like to have an energy drawn down future? And his presentation was very straightforward. I don't think he used any slides. I think he had like a pad of paper, and it was extremely impactful. We left that thinking, no, we're not going to build a cape or a colonial and, be kind of go down that route. We're going to build our own home, and it will be passive solar, and we're going to grow our own food. So that kind of kicked us off on kind of a back to the land effort. Fast forward, we have 2 children. They're beautiful. My daughter, Eliza, who's now in her 40s, and both of my children are now in their 40s, and my son, Benjamin. We lived on the side of a hill and we raised food. We worked. We weren't self-sustaining, and we did jobs to make our way. My husband was a teacher. I did all kinds of odd jobs, and I stitched for a living. Primarily, it was something I could do at home. I was raising the children. And we had a vacation one summer on a lake in Maine, and it was a nearby lake. And I had time to think, and I had time to read, and I had time to see what the future was, a future that was unfolding before my children. And it was like my maternal instincts just kicked into overdrive and said, you're not leaving them a planet that is safe for your children, not for their children. And it's going to be extremely difficult. And it's also going to be depraved of the kinds of beauty that we're experiencing right now on this lake if we don't do something different. So that is when I decided I'm going to, even though I had a job, I had 2 small children, that I'm going to go back to school and get the skills and the abilities that I needed to make a difference. And yeah, I said kind of tongue in cheek that I wanted to save the world. It is what I wanted to do. It's still what I'd like to do. It's my ambition. But I mean, of course, I don't have any kind of grandiose idea that I would ever do that on my own, but be part of a movement that can do it. Yeah, I'm right there. And so, yeah, I guess that kind of, there was a last part to that. Oh, what do my family think about this? And they were extremely, all of them had to put up with it. Though I did, I went to school during the day when my children were in school, and I did all my schoolwork at night after they had gone to bed. So I was 24/7 basically trying to make this work. It took me 6 years to get through a 4-year degree program, but I designed my own major. They didn't have what I wanted to learn at the nearby college, so I designed my own major, and which was in ecology and education. I wanted to learn how to redesign the education system centered on an ecological framework as opposed to a mechanistic framework. And little did I know that I would still be doing that kind of work in a different way, perhaps, but all these years later. What my family thinks about it, they know I'm really driven and committed to this work. They're all really wonderful people with their own lives. And I think they appreciate what I do. I do get the comments, and I'm just going to be out up front here, because I think, and I've said this to other people, and they've said we have this experience too. So I think it's helpful to get this out in the open. One of the things my children say to me is, well, if it's that bad, then you should just be spending time with us, like more time.
Yeah.
Just being with us in so that's a struggle for me, because I feel that pull, and I do what I can in that regard, but I still feel very strongly that if I don't do everything I can right now in this point in time, I would feel like I'd be letting them down. My granddaughters age from 22 now to 2, almost 2. So there's quite a span. They're all granddaughters. I have 5 of them. They're all beautiful. And I'm doing this for them. And hopefully, they'll know that.
Yeah. And I think that is that feeling, that pull to spend more time with people, to live your life in a way that is fulfilling with your family versus working hard and trying to make a difference. I feel like so many people in this line of work feel that pull either way. And I think that most people who are committed would agree that you're showing your love by committing everything that you have to trying to make the world a better place, and you can't just let that go. So I can appreciate that feeling for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
And yeah. And I did just want to comment too that I find it interesting that so many of our landscape leaders seem to do similar to what you did, which is design their own program if they go back to school, just because there isn't really a program out there that's been designed to do everything that you need to do that's holistic. So I think that that's awesome that you signed your own major.
Right. And
Mhm.
I in that major, I took courses in economics, in biology, in ecology, in a lot. I was centered in the honors program, which was very heavy into philosophy and Western philosophy primarily, but not entirely. And so I drew from many departments. Writing skills. I didn't have speaking skills. I had never spoken to more than 5 people at a time, and I had to learn how to be comfortable with that. And so there was just a lot I needed to get under my belt, and I just knew what it was. So I just kind of picked what I needed, and it worked out really well. I felt like I got an excellent education. There were a couple of duds, okay, but I had a great education at University of Southern Maine. I'm going to give a shout out to my alma mater.
All right, rah rah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that from what I've experienced of you, you are completely prepared for this moment and for what you're doing. So you've picked it up from your education and experience. And I want to actually reflect on with you your relationship to landscapes. You know, we have so many landscape leaders that are in this network, coming from a variety of different backgrounds, expertise, perspectives. You're the first ecologist that we're interviewing, and land connection has come up several times, but through the lens of an ecologist will be something new. So I'm wondering if you can share with us some of the qualities of your local landscape. I know you have a really close relationship with lakes, being a lake ecologist specifically. And what are some of the beautiful wild things you see that you can share with us, maybe inspire us as an ecologist or just as Roberta walking through the forest?
Well, the first one that just comes rushing to mind is my experience yesterday. It was my last day on lake. So one of the things I do, I have a number of hats that I wear, just cobbling together both a living and a life way. But one of the things I do is I do work on lakes, monitoring them for the presence of invasive aquatic species. And I have decades of experience in that work. And when I was working for a nonprofit organization for 23 years, I trained volunteers to do this work. So I could draw from those stories, which are very rich. But what I want to talk about was our last field day yesterday. My partner's name is Keith, and we were on a lake up in the Lovell area, which is also Western Maine, but it's getting higher into the mountains, and it's surrounded by mountains. It's really an exquisite part of the state. And we had this one little patch to do. It wasn't so little. It was a pretty gargantuan wetland. When you get into the wetlands, you have to really kind of muck in there to see what you can see. You're trying to screen the entire littoral zone of this 900 and some odd acre lake, and so you need to, when the plants get really dense, it's hard paddling. You don't want to use motors through that. You need to paddle, and it's pretty hard paddling. Well, our friends are the beaver. So the beaver who live in these areas, they develop networks of trails that they fortunately, nicely carve out. It's just enough to get the keel of the boat in a comfortable place to get through them. And so we were just following beaver trails through the wetland, and the sky was kind of lifting off the mountaintops. The low clouds were lifting, a little bit of sun shining through. It was truly just if I can say, it would have felt like really like we were in a sacred place. We were in their world, and we were, we're often visited by dragonflies who will land on our huts and, sea turtles darting away from our paddles and such. And that is, Keith and I will look at each other and we'll say, well, this is a good day on the water. You couldn't pay someone to have a good day like that. And yet we're doing the work. We're being very watchful. That's what we're being paid to do, but it's just beautiful work. And we ended up following one of the beaver trails back to a smaller beaver hut where it had designed a really nice pool behind its lodge. And from that pool, we were able to access this bit of woods that I think that was the only way you could access it, was from Beaver Trail. And it had not been cut in, I don't even know, hundreds of years.
Wow.
And it was just a stand of pine and hemlock, of apex forest. There's very little undergrowth and a very, very, here in Maine, and a very dense, spongy layer of pine needles and mosses. And it, again, just really felt like we were in a cathedral of these trees. And that was just where we had our lunch. And so that is the kind of work that I do. I love my work. It's hard work. I mean, we put in very long days, but it's also just glorious.
Wow, that's so beautiful. You clearly have just so much love for your place and the landscapes there and all the work that you do. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you envision a healthy northern Acadian forest to look like. What kind of landscape would you want to leave your children and grandchildren?
Well, that's a big question, because we know that a certain amount of climate chaos is baked into the system at this point. We know that one of the tipping points is the boreal forest, the northern and more southerly boreal forests. Maine is kind of at the intersection. Parts of Maine are kind of at the intersection of that more southerly boreal forest and the more northerly, but there's going to be shift in the forest, and it's not species that we're all used to seeing here in Maine may not make it through. Some of them may be able to migrate northerly, and some may be lost to other things that are happening as a result of not just climate chaos, but human impacts, which are invasive species, the kind of thing that I've been involved in for a long time, helping to train volunteers to be mindful and to be on the lookout for invasive species. So I guess this is, I'll just say, my hope is that we will be good, watchful, careful. And when I say careful, I'm kind of meaning that the world, if you understand ecology, you understand that the world is incredibly complex, because it's all comprised of relationships. And if you bear that in mind, that it's so complex that not one person or not an AI or anything can get its head around that complexity. We try to understand it as best we can. And as Joe Brewer has pointed out really beautifully, we know so much about earth science and the way Earth works, and that's wonderful. We have to draw upon that, but I think we also have to be really careful to recognize that we may not know it all. So we should always be erring on the side of caution, which is something that we haven't been obviously doing. We're just like full speed ahead on the global growth economy, and we'll just see what happens and we'll deal with it afterwards. I mean, that's been the kind of the cultural narrative. But so I'm saying, I hope that we've learned to be more careful, and that we are mindful of what not only Western science tells us, but the science that goes back, predates Western science, which is the just careful, respectful observation of nature that allowed indigenous folk on this planet to live here, basically
Yeah.
in harmony for the most part for millennia. And so, and I'm really proud our state of Maine basically just recently received some National Science Foundation grant money to put together a program here that will try to combine Western scientific knowledge and indigenous knowledge as a focal point for our higher education systems in the state. And I think that's a wonderful step. So I hope we can really develop that so we can learn how best to deal with we're not going to protect every species we have now. And that's a hard thing to come to grips with, because if you live in Maine, you know how much the people of Maine love what we have and will just do so much to protect it. And we need to bring that willingness into a place where we understand that though we may not save it all, every relationship that we can foster and strengthen and feed and nurture is going to prevent a more wide-scale unraveling. And there's so much we can do. So I'm hoping that people are engaged at their very, very local level up to the bioregional level and trans bioregional global level. But I can't picture what the future forest is going to look like. I guess that's a complicated answer to a complicated question.
Well, how appropriate. No, that makes a lot of sense. It was really good. Definitely informative. I think people are going to appreciate that. So much of what you talk about is a shifting paradigm. And so maybe we think more about, in these coming questions, about what that looks like and some of the themes there within. You mentioned blending traditional ecological knowledge with science. I've heard that referred to as two-eyed seeing, which I think is a poetic way of putting it. And I'm wondering if you can reflect. I think you probably have a really interesting perspective, certainly with regards to your relationship with science. Probably also a complex question and answer. I'm ready for it, but I'm wondering, what is that relationship for you? And maybe I'll just leave it at that for now.
All right. So I love that question because I do have a take on science. It's not my take necessarily. I mean, basically, people have understood that science has its limitations, and there's certain questions that science cannot answer. But I kind of started with that as my grounding premise, and tried to understand. I love science. I love the process of observing and creating a theory, a hypothesis about how things work, and testing the hypotheses and coming up with a conclusion and having that tested by other scientists. I think that's a beautiful process for learning, but it is a tool to be used by the kind of learning that is embodied in traditional ecological knowledge, but it's embodied in all of us. We're all born with this ability to learn through direct experience with nature, which is basically what we are all part of. So our external world and our internal world they're just inherently connected, and exploring that is something that people have been doing since I think human beings came to be. So we all have access to that deeper way of knowing, inquiring about the world, and coming up with understandings about the world. And I believe that way has a much broader, more comprehensive, more cohesive, more relational, more holistic way of seeing the world. And it's because we have favored, and I don't want to say anything bad about science because it has given us a lot, but we have almost forgotten that it's a tool. It's a tool, but it's not the thing. And all the stuff that science leaves out is not unimportant. It's not to be not valued. So as an ecologist and as an educator, I've always had a lot of fun with starting right off the bat, no matter who I'm talking to, kind of talking about the limitations of science, or at least it will come up in the course of us going out and starting to do field work together, because I think it's really important, especially for young people, to realize that if they don't have a scientific bent, like they don't feel like they really respond to the science that they're getting in their textbooks and so on, that they have a curious mind and that they have the ability to study and gain insight into the world around them and to their ability to comprehend the world. I often tell young students that being an artist and being a scientist have very, very similar skill sets, in that artists, if they're drawing from experience, which most art is, drawing from experience, it's this careful observation phase. And that's something, again, that anyone can do. I also bring up the fact that, what we understand, if we're understanding it through science, basically through technology, our understanding is going to be limited by the reach of our tools. Like, how big is your hand lens? How high a magnification can you see in your microscope? How far can your telescope see? What our understanding is constantly being updated as our technology allows us to learn more and more. So we should never again feel like we've got a complete grasp of things, because as our technology changes, and frankly, our worldview is part of our, if you want to call it our social technology, our way of viewing the world, can also bring insights that we're missing through just a fully mechanistic technological lens. So those are just a couple of ways. I think it's really important to make sure people understand that relationship between science and our whole selves and our whole understanding of the world.
Oh, and I'm so glad that you brought up your educator background and how you're bringing all of this knowledge to your community, because that's really what I think separates a landscape leader from someone who is simply working on restoring the land, is that you're not just doing it by yourself. You are trying to bring in as many people as possible. And it sounds like you work with a wide array of community members. I'm wondering how you've approached working with young kids that are really just so open to different worldviews, that you having that interaction with you at such a young age is going to have such a powerful impact. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how the younger kids kind of respond to some of these activities that you do with them.
I really had the pleasure to work with young people, pre-K to high school, in the public school system for a couple of decades through 2 jobs I had in the nonprofit sector. And I was an itinerant ecology teacher, primarily around lake ecology. And I had, when I first was given the first position, the executive director says, okay, you're our educator, you're going to be creating an ecology program to bring into the public school system. Here's a box full of curriculum materials that we have been putting aside here in this box for, quite some time. We don't think any of this stuff is in the classroom. So design a program to get in the classroom. So that was kind of my marching orders. And I was also still involved. I was an intern, so I was still involved in my the research I was doing for my honors thesis, which was ecology and education, how to design basically our school system or our education system based around an ecological model. And so I had that all fresh in my mind. So I thought, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring these curriculum materials into it, but I'm going to have three kind of primary legs of the stool of my program. The first one is going to be that we're going to, the students are going to talk about what's meaningful to them, what they see in their community. We're going to, and then eventually identify some kind of concern or some kind of opportunity that they would like to get engaged on. So there would be a community project, a land-based community project. I would also be teaching ecology and primarily lake ecology, but lakes are attached to everything else. So obviously the water cycle touches the atmosphere, the land, and lakes and rivers, ponds, and watersheds. So I would be teaching lake ecology, and they would be engaged in that. That would be more of the classroom portion. And then there would also be an opportunity for them to research based on what they were learning, both on their on-the-ground project and through their ecology lessons. They'd be able to do their own research on their project, and I would be there to support them in that project. And part of that would culminate in making a presentation to someone, but mostly the adults in their community, either their teachers and faculty members, or in many cases to their local municipalities, of what they were doing and why it was important and how the community could support them doing more of this kind of work in the future. So those were the things I brought into all my my courses, whatever grade they were. And it were for the very youngest kids, really just being in nature and understanding that they were connected to it and that they could participate in just appreciating it in many, many ways, that they had these wonderful senses. And so just getting kids to use their senses, just exercises like having one child put a blindfold on their partner and lead them carefully off into the woods to a certain spot, and the blindfolded youth, and this happen, you can do this at a very young age, would be able to feel around. Do you feel a tree, a rock, the moss? What do you feel in this area? What do you hear? Has the temperature changed here? Because there's these little microclimates. So be mindful of everything. And then they're led back to the starting point, and the blindfolded child then has a chance to go find their spot without their blindfold, using just the information that they had gleaned from their very sensual experience of that place. And this is, again, sense of place. This is starting this at a very cursory level in a very, very simple way. But this is often what's missing from schools. It just seems to me such a no-brainer way. It's a way we learn naturally through our curiosity and our concern and our but anyway, I loved that work, and I loved working with young ones. And then I went on to working with adult learners, which I also enjoyed very, very much. I had students in there that were octogenarians, but yet I loved it all. And I'm looking forward, it sounds through CEBE, my work at the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy, that I will be working at least with teachers and perhaps back in the classroom again with maybe middle school and high school students. And I'm eager to see how we can bring the bioregional work into that.
Yeah, well, thank you for such a comprehensive answer. For me, what stands out is the importance of accessibility for land connection. You earlier in the conversation, you brought up your opportunity to have the time to read and to just sit into a landscape, and that's what led you to become an ecologist. And for these young people and old people who maybe haven't had that opportunity, it's such a transformative experience. The land itself can change us if we just learn to listen. I think that's such an important lesson. It's such an important lesson. A couple more questions we've got to cover. when you joined the design school, you were so enthusiastic. You brought so much energy. I feel like you just ignited the room whenever you walked in. I'm curious, can you share a little bit about what inspired you so much about the school?
Well, that's a great question. And even though you sent me the questions ahead of time, I hadn't given this one much thought. I'd thought about some of the other ones. So this is going to be completely off the cuff, but it's easy to talk to. And I think it's stated in my bio here at the design school, I was born for this work. I recognized this immediately as where I belong. There was just no question about it. And that is because this perspective I've had from a very early age. I really gained my ecological awareness as a tiny kid in the Pacific Ocean, floating on the surface of the ocean and letting the wave action, the soft wave action out beyond the breakers, rising and falling, and the salt air everywhere, and the sun and everything. And I would absolutely disappear as a person, as I was called Bobby then. And so Bobby would disappear and I would be one with everything. And, I would pretend I didn't hear my parents when they called me to come in because I simply loved it there. And I took that from a very early age as what was real. And much of what I was being fed by the society around me was not even thinking of that at all, that connectedness to nature. And so I had a hard time seeing myself in my school. The first paper I ever wrote was on what if we were suddenly all attacked by something from outer space? Wouldn't then we stop fighting with each other? I think I was like in the 4th grade. Like I just had this sense like we just needed to understand that we are one. But again, it wasn't really being reflected back to me much by the consumer culture that was really ramping up. It started in the 50s. That's when I was born, in the 50s. And so I was really the guinea pig generation for, just the rampant neoliberal consumer culture that that has now kind of brought our planet to the brink. So when I heard Joe talk and I'd seen some of his videos, and then I got the book and read the book, and then I learned through his outreach, the school was starting up. I was like maybe the first one to sign up. I don't even know. It was like, I want to do this. And he said, oh, okay, well, we're just starting to get some people and we'll get back to you when we're really going to make it happen. I just recognized that this is thinking that I have been longing for, being in the company of such thinking my whole life. And that and then the more I learned about this kind of the bioregion, it's kind of like this magic scale in some ways, where we can still feel connected to this as if it's home, as if we identify with it because we're culturally familiar with it enough to call it home, but yet it's large enough to actually have potency at the global scale, which is where we need to be making the changes now. And then I understood, and then, yeah, the whole Danella, we had talked about Danella Meadows and her leverage schema, where the most effective and the greatest leverage exists at the point of shifting worldviews. And because I've had that other worldview my whole life, more or less, I thought like and because I've been an educator, because I have some ecological skills that I can bring to task, I think I'm I think I've been preparing for this work my whole life. I mean, I honestly feel that way. And who knows how that happens? I'm not going to say I've got it figured out, but I'm just following that gut feeling. And and every time I follow that gut feeling, I end up in a better place. So I'm sticking with it.
Oh, that's so great. Well, and I think that you have clearly, within the design school, we've been on meetings with you where you're focusing on your story, and you've been working at this for the Design School for Regenerating Earth started in March
March.
2023. So over the past 7 months, I feel like we've been able to kind of see your story. You hone in on the frames that you want to use, and all of the different talking points, and you've really put it together very nicely. You recently gave a webinar with the Center for Ecology-Based Economy, or CEBE, where you talked about your story and bioregionalism and why it's so important. So I just wanted to say how impressed we are. You're really bringing this to your community when you're talking about this. I think that that's such an amazing example of what a landscape leader can do, is bringing bioregionalism and bioregional learning to their community. And you even talking about Danella Meadows and how paradigm shifts are the greatest leverage point. I'm wondering what other elements or what other frames you've used that have been really impactful when you've shared this story.
What other frames? Other than the ecological frame, I think that's fundamental to who I am and to this story. So I always make sure people understand just the essentials of ecology as a starting point for then understanding why. For example, I was asked a while back to do a presentation for middle school students, a kind of series of classes of middle school students who were involved in a community art class. It was an art class, but they were charged with creating community art. And so the students had identified two issues that they were really concerned with. And I think it's really telling in a way what those concerns were. One was basically pollution, including carbon pollution, and climate change. And the other was mental health. And so those were their two identified concerns that they needed help expressing in their community. So I did a presentation to them about, like, what's pollution and what does that have to do with mental health? And I wasn't going to hit hard on the mental health thing, but it was just almost like it couldn't not be said once you understand why we have pollution. We have pollution because we're not playing into the natural cycles that matter on this planet has been recycled for it's either 3 or 8 billion years, correct me on that, but for billions of years, the same matter around and around and around. And up until like the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't a major problem. There was no major problems with pollution, but we stopped participating in that recycling of matter. And now we have too much unrecyclable matter all over the world. That's pollution. And once the students could see, like, once they understood the ecological principles of things needing to recycle over and over again, and how does that happen in the forest? How does it happen in your garden? And now what's happening on the planet? Stuff is stuck there. And that's what pollution is. And if you're living in a place where this is what you have to deal with, what do you think you're going to feel like? You're going to be really depressed about what's happening to your neighborhood or your community. And so they got all that, and they ended up making some beautiful community art. But I just wanted to use that as an example of how starting with fundamentals of ecology is, I think, like critically important. Even though all of us, a lot of us are, we understand ecology as a word, and it's a study, and it might have to do with relationships and stuff. I think to really kind of spend some time going through the fundamentals, I think, is a pretty important grounding frame. It's
I-
my only frame as a, somebody who's come of settler culture.
Yeah. Well, what a clever connection between the way we are treating our landscapes and resource flows and mental health. I think I so often think I look at the world and I think to myself, it is insane. It is insane, and we need like a broad awakening that the only way to awaken ourselves out of so much suffering, I think, as a collective, is to see more clearly things like material flows, understand our impact on ecology, and that it impacts us all the way down to our psychology and the way we experience life. It's all connected. It's all connected. And sometimes it's just these simple connections that need to be made that allow people to see things anew. And then we can start talking about possibilities once we're really clear on the why. So I think that's beautiful. Thank you for that framing. I think it's actually a good place to kind of wrap up the conversation. We do want to say Bioregional Activation Tour in the Northern Acadian Forest, fall of 2024. It's a little ways off, but we're already excited. Anna and I hope to join you there. And lastly, is there any way that we can support you and CEBE? So much of what we're doing, Anna and I, here with these conversations is lifting landscape leaders up, clarifying the role, showing that these people really, really matter for bioregional regeneration everywhere. So with that said, with that spirit, how can we support you in CEBE?
Well, for one, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if it hadn't been for the design school and for you and you. So that's just be really clear that you've already done and are doing so much by continuing on, showing your own leadership, making me feel like, I think I could do that. Oh, wouldn't I love to try that? So you're inspiring me, you're encouraging me, you're teaching me. So I can't say that you could do any more on that front. And this idea of a podcast, well, I have to take some credit. I had it too. I think it's a brilliant way that we can, with limited resources, start sharing these stories so that others like me, who has, in many ways felt quite isolated with regard to me bringing my whole self to the table, which I think is what we're talking about here, now, is that if we're going to do this, we all have to bring our whole selves to the table. And there's some places where, I was still feeling like, is that welcome here? I don't really know. But the more we can share these stories and the more people can feel, this is, I really get that. And I have felt the same. That's gonna be so powerful and impactful. So I just say, keep on doing exactly what you're doing. It's beautiful. And I'm just in so much awe of what you're all accomplishing with what we're all accomplishing here. I feel like we're all part of it, here at the design school. I'm really proud of the work we're doing here with the amazing leadership that we have.
Well, I do want to just say, you just pointed out something that's just so valuable when we're talking about paradigm shifting. So much of it is storytelling. So much of it is building coherence around a new story of possibility. And you just mentioned something interesting, and that is something that gives us permission. We're all giving each other permission to share this story as we all practice doing it and practice putting ourselves out there. So let's do that together.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just to also mention that we will be, when we release this episode, we will definitely be including a link to Roberta's webinar that she gave for CEBE as the new Bioregional Coordinator. And we'll also include a link to CEBE's website, ecology-based-economy.org, where you can also donate to the organization that's doing some amazing things in Maine. Thank you so much, Roberta, for joining us and for sharing your really incredible story. We really appreciate it.
I so appreciated having this opportunity to be with you both, Anna and Benji.
Thanks for listening. If you're feeling a jolt of inspiration,
If you'd like to support Anna and me in our ongoing efforts to tell these stories, you can donate to us on our Patreon at Awakening Lands. Links for all of this can be found in the show notes. Thanks, and please tell your landscape we said hello.